Hello, everyone. I'm Dawn Garcia. I'm the director of the John S. Knight Journalism Fellowships here at Stanford University. I'm excited to welcome you to the second in a new speaker series that we've launched this year. It's called the JSK Community Impact Speaker Series, and it's designed to further amplify the work of our JSK Community Impact Fellows and to highlight voices of those who are changing how local news is gathered and delivered. We look forward to a rich conversation today. Today's session is Empowering Diverse Communities Through High Impact Journalism. In this series, you'll hear from people who are working on tangible solutions and best practices. At the JSK Fellowships, we like to think we are the doing fellowship. We don't just think about problems, we take the initiative to do something about them. That's what makes our fellows and the community of journalists here today game changers in the industry. Just a note that the video for this conversation and the last session will be both available to watch on our JSK Fellowships YouTube channel if you'd like to see something later. So speaking of game changers, I'd like to introduce you to the moderator of today's session, Paulette Brown Hines. Paulette is a JSK Community Impact Fellow this year. She's working to explore how small newsrooms serving diverse communities can do solutions-focused data reporting about racial equity and justice. Paulette is the publisher of the Black Voices News and co-founder of Media in Color. And Paulette has many years working in community media and working to strategize how to use Black media as a trusted source for community news and information, as well as an advocate for California's community media sector. And she's been collaborating with media professionals to ensure that California's news media organizations in communities of color are really self-sufficient civic actors who are informing, empowering, and advancing interests of their communities. I'm going to turn it over now to Paulette. I could go on for a while, but I think I'd like to hear from Paulette, and she's going to introduce the rest of our amazing panel. Paulette, kick it off.
Thank you, Dawn, so much. And thank you to my panelists here and to all of you watching us today. And I also want to thank the rest of the JSK staff, especially Alberto Mendoza, for giving us the opportunity to have this important conversation today. There is an opportunity for questions, hopefully at the end of our conversation. And so if you'd like to put questions, please use the Q&A function. I would like to begin our discussion with a vision of the possibilities of what our communities can look like if we have more high quality, local, community-centered, public service and solutions-oriented journalism. So imagine communities with less partisan polarization and more candidates running for office in more competitive races, more voters participating in local elections, and a more engaged electorate. Imagine cities with less municipal debt, regions with cleaner air, access to quality water for all communities, not just the affluent ones, less particulate matter in the air and more green space, less corruption at all levels of government, and public safety agencies that reflect the communities they serve. Imagine community members active in articulating solutions to their most challenging problems, and that they are engaged in setting priorities and the agenda for how they would address community needs. Imagine more public conversation on issues critical to the future of our communities and regions, and all residents in our communities having the information they need to make the best possible decisions for their own lives. And so I'm excited today to be joined by leaders in some of California's newsrooms that are producing the kind of journalism that moves us toward this vision. And they're working in their hometowns in Sacramento and Vallejo and Oakland. And we're excited to talk with them today. I think we're going to learn a lot, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. So first, I want to introduce our panelists. I want to start with Jeff King. He's the founder and CEO of the Informed California Foundation and its first project, Open Vallejo, which in its 2 short years history has been producing accurate, fair, and thorough, high quality investigative and enterprise reporting in one of our most diverse cities in the state. Jeff is also one of my colleagues at the JSK Community Impact Fellowship here at Stanford. And he's a press freedom advocate and was a First Amendment litigator representing journalists, activists, and artists in free expression and open government matters. His compassion for community comes through in the care in which his newsroom reports on its community, especially those impacted by police violence. So welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
Next, we have Madeline Baer. In her hometown of Oakland, Madeline founded El Timpano, a participatory reporting lab designed with and for Oakland's Latino and Mayan immigrant communities. Through an iterative, community-centered process and in collaboration with residents, El Timpano partners to create empowering two-way channels of reporting, including original journalism produced in collaboration with the community and in partnership with other news outlets. Previously, Madeline worked at the International Human Rights Organization Witness, where she led a pioneering program with the mission of advancing the role of citizens in documenting human rights abuse. Thank you for joining me today, Madeline.
Thanks so much.
And then finally, we have one of my oldest friends, and I don't know how long we've known each other. Larry, it's been like decades. Larry Lee is a second generation publisher of the Sacramento Observer, and one of the leaders behind Solving Sacramento, which is a new collaborative of nonprofit and for-profit local newsrooms, educational institutions, and community partners working together to produce and share news stories on the issues that most impact the larger Sacramento metro region. And I believe you're starting with affordable housing and solutions to rebooting the arts this year. So I'm excited to hear more about that. As publisher of the Sacramento Observer, which I celebrate 60 years this year.
60 in November.
Oh my gosh. We're at 50, 10 years on us, Larry, 50 years of the Black Voice News. So 60
the gray hair shows on me much more than it shows on you, Paulette.
We gray late in life. But we're the same age. So Larry is leading the digital transformation of the award-winning news organization with a focus on accountability and public service journalism, as well as continuing to document important community achievements, which is an important aspect of the Black press. Larry and I have many things that we share as second generation publishers. Our families have known each other for a long time, but I want to add that both of our fathers have schools named for them as part of the Fortune Schools of Education, which are some of the highest performing charter schools for Black students in California. There's the Dr. William Lee College Prep School in Sacramento, and then there's the Hardy Brown College Prep in San Bernardino.
Great, so excellent shout out.
Had to do that. Do that.
Wonderful.
Margaret will be happy that we did that, Margaret Fortune.
Yes.
And then I've also gotten to know Larry even more and Madeline through the work we're doing with Media and Color in the Sustainability Lab. So excited that all three of you are here with me today. I hope we can cover several things. I hope we'll learn more about innovations in local news, as Dawn mentioned in her intro, including community-centered approaches, use of new technologies, deep listening, and how we are defining and measuring impact. I want to spend a little time talking about that, as well as lessons learned from the work that we've been doing here in service of the diverse communities in California. So that's my intro. I'd love to see everyone on the screen if possible. And I'd like to start with just briefly, and Larry, we could start with you, just a little bit more about yourself, the community you serve there in Sacramento, and how your journalism is empowering the community.
Sure, again, thank you, Paulette, for inviting me to participate in this panel, and thank you to JSK and everyone there as well too. I again, as you mentioned, second generation newspaper publisher. My dad was one of the founders in November of 1962. The Observer has been really regarded as one of the nation's best Black newspapers. Over our course of our 60 years, we've received about 700 awards for our journalism excellence and community service, and have really tried to stand on the credo of the Black press that no one else will speak for us but us, and have tried to really empower, educate, and enlighten our community on a number of issues. And I think this moment that we're in now is just as great as it was probably when the Observer started in 1962. The circumstances have changed. There is more opportunity for Black wealth. There's more opportunity for integrated housing and other things like that. However, the disparities that impact our community, whether they're through healthcare, lack of education, poor wealth accumulation for African Americans, food deserts, environmental issues, and of course, police brutality and the challenges that we have with law enforcement are just as great as they were, if not even worse. The stakes are probably even greater now than they were in the 60s when we started. So I've always tried to really help shepherd our newsroom into really trying to do the work that is required in the 21st century. And I know we'll talk a lot about the different things that everyone's doing, but I think the good thing for the Observer is a couple things. One, my dad he was the publisher of our paper for 52 years, longer than anyone else in California history. And I was able to spend about 25 of those years right next to him as a professional, not to mention the years as I was as a young person, watching both he and my mother be tireless advocates for our community. And so we've kind of have two generations of leaders in our newsroom that have been able to really witness and observe the conditions of our people. And through the work of our journalism, have tried to really change that. And we're very fortunate to have had such longevity and stability at the top, I would say. The other part of it is as a second generation publisher in this space, I really understand and recognize the importance of local news and how it can actually change the conditions for the people on the ground. And Paulette, you did a wonderful introduction talking about really the value of local news, more so than kind of a polarized national climate. And things, less, you get less disinformation at local news, you get a lot more impact at local news. And so I'm a strong advocate at being actually, the best newsroom that we can for our community here in Sacramento. So I know we'll talk more. I don't want to hear myself ramble, so I'll shut my mic off now.
Oh, no, this is good. And I want to jump to Madeline. Before I do that though, Larry, like you're talking about, your dad publishing for 52 years, you being there for 25 years. I've been, my family's had the Black Voice for 40 years. It's been, I can't remember when it wasn't in my life, I was, such a young person. But the tremendous challenge in building a rebuilding, right, this kind of modern newsroom. What's the hardest part for you? What is the hardest part then in this work you're doing in terms of the transformational work that has to happen in the newsroom?
I can make a list. Resources is always going to be a challenge, right? Financial resources is always going to be a challenge. But let's just say we just had financial resources we didn't have to worry about that. I would say creating the culture of the shift of the newsroom. We actually just came last week. We had a retreat as a staff where we talked really about what does being a digital first newsroom mean. We want to be a digital first newsroom with world-class print products. And so what does digital first mean? So it means, the habit that I myself am a victim of having, had our news cycle revolve around the weekly print product, right? Yeah. That entirely has to change, and it has to change in a number of different ways. Part of it is just consumerism and technology. There's that. But then, so we have to be in a place where people know that they can rely on getting relatively new news information from us. And it might not necessarily be breaking news, maybe it's just a pivot, a perspective, but it needs to be timely in that fashion. But the other part of that is, if we do that well, it will allow us to embolden our print product to be more of a more valuable product each and every week that we publish it. And so I think that that's kind of the mix, the secret sauce that we're searching for. Being sustainable in the digital space is really challenging. Monetizing what we do, particularly a small newsroom that might not get, large numbers of visitors, that might not have, be able to generate resources or revenue through programmatic advertising, digital advertising is a challenge. But we feel like we feel like we're figuring some things out. We don't have it figured out, but we're figuring some things out.
No, and I think you are. I love watching what you're doing. As a legacy publisher as well, some of the same challenges. I'm really excited to talk with Madeline and Jeff both. As digital first, and then Larry and you and I are for-profit entities. Madeline, Jeff, nonprofit newsrooms. Madeline, can you talk a little bit about the community you serve, how your journalism is empowering that community? Why you even started doing this work?
Yeah, sure. And I also just, want to say what an honor it is to be a part of this conversation, Paulette. Yeah, to start, I got my start in journalism when I was an 8-year-old and joined a youth media organization at a church in downtown Oakland. And I won't go through my whole life story since then, but I mentioned that because youth media is really a gateway to media criticism and media analysis. And so as I went on to pursue a career in journalism, I continued to come back to these questions of, how does media reflect our communities, whose perspectives are reflected in the media, who does the media serve, and who does it leave out? And so I started El Tímpano about 5 years ago when I moved back to Oakland, and saw that Latino immigrants were the fastest growing communities here in Oakland, have been for the past 20 years. And yet, you would have no idea by consuming local media. And so, and at the same time, media serving the needs of Spanish-speaking immigrants, as well as the growing community of Indigenous Mayan immigrants here in Oakland has really dwindled. And so, El Tímpano, the word means eardrum, and our mission is to inform, engage, and amplify the voices of Latino and Mayan immigrants. And I really started El Tímpano without any assumptions of what local media must look like, because local media has, for the most part, not well-served immigrant communities. And so, rather than starting with a website or a team of reporters or a 3-year plan, I really started by listening and by building relationships with leaders and residents from Oakland's Latino and Mayan communities. And so, we started by developing a community and listening to Spanish and Mayan speaking immigrants to hear, what do you want to see in Spanish language news? What is the information that you need to be engaged in your communities? How do you get news and information? What do you want to see differently from the media that exists? And I spent nearly a year in this process of just listening, and all of our strategies, our distribution strategies and engagement strategies and editorial priorities have really been shaped by that process, and by ongoing listening to the communities that we cover and serve. And so that's why El Timpano does look, our model is very different from most local news outlets. We're actually a text first newsrooms. And that's because so many of the community members that we talked to said, I don't have a home computer, I don't have an email address, but I use a phone, and I wish I could get news, in an accessible way. And so we have a text messaging platform that today serves 10% of Oakland Spanish-speaking households. We also do a lot of in-person outreach, really just to build trust, to meet community members where they're at, to introduce ourselves, and continue that, two-way conversation. And then finally, we produce in-depth journalism that is really powered by those community engagement efforts. So we've partnered with KQED, we've partnered with the Oakland side, we've partnered with national public radio programs to investigate and amplify the stories that community members are bringing to our attention. And just to, you asked like, who do we serve? What does that community look like? We're serving hotel cleaners, day laborers, construction workers. Our audience members are, for the most part, very low income, and have had the highest rates of COVID-19, at least pre-Omicron COVID-19 here in the Bay Area. And so in terms of the impact, I look forward to talking a lot more about that, because there's a lot of ways that that we're really addressing gaps in serving communities that have been extremely impacted by the pandemic in the past few years.
Now, I love what you're doing, deep listening. You're going to be the first one I asked about impact, because I want to talk a little. I want you to talk a little bit about that. Jeff, I want you to jump in. You're also there in your hometown of Vallejo, and can you talk a little bit about the community that you're serving there, how your journalism is empowering that community, kind of why you're even, why you started Open Vallejo in the first place?
Yes, and let me just echo that I'm honored to be here I'm a fan of everybody here, so thank you for including me. And I'm glad that you led for me with really talking about community, because I need to express how bad things are here. My hometown of Vallejo is a working class community of about 120,000 people, in near equal numbers of Black, Latinx, Asian Pacific Islander, and white residents. So it's one of the most diverse places in the entire country. It is nestled between Silicon Valley and their glittering startups, and the verdant fields of Napa Valley. It's 45 minutes from San Francisco, an hour from Sacramento, and it's like a whole different world. And so growing up as a nerdy kid in the one quarter of the community in Vallejo that was least impacted by the systemic racism that plagues this place and the rest of the country, I mostly at the time knew Vallejo by how it was frequently described. A city with a lot of potential. Nobody really knew why it was always so kind of hard on its luck. Schools were terrible. The roads were even worse. The reason is that the legacy of Jim Crow stalks the descendants of the immigrants who fled the racial terror of the South. Most came to work in the Mare Island Naval Shipyard, the oldest shipyard on the West Coast. They built everything from paddle wheel gunboats to nuclear subs. And for more than 140 years, it served as the city's primary and almost sole economic engine. It helped forge the city as a Navy town, where policing was more about maintaining order than enforcing the law. About 100 white cops here hurt and kill residents at a rate higher than almost any other department in California. Soon to be published research from us shows that since 2000, 1 in 10 homicides have been at the hands of the police. And the Vallejo police are about twice as deadly as their counterparts in nearby Oakland, which has been under federal oversight for years. Corruption is endemic here. and anybody who speaks up is targeted for reprisal, whether that's journalists, civil rights lawyers, or ordinary residents. And so Vallejo is not a functioning democracy. So I founded it on February 9th. I founded Open Vallejo on February 9th, 2019. That was the night that 6 Vallejo police officers surrounded a car in which a 20-year-old young man named Willie McCoy had fallen asleep. He allegedly had a gun in his lap, and he never had a chance to surrender or wake up. They fired 55 rounds at him, 38 of which hit him, 13 of which were mortal wounds. That I was here because my dad had died when I was 30, and my mom had at the time undiagnosed. I'm sorry, she had diagnosed, but she had Alzheimer's, and so I was spending more time here, as part of taking care of things. I just started to see more what was happening. And so the first thing we did was we got the Willie McCoy body cam video out. At the time, California law did not provide for that. Law called SB 1421 had passed, but had not yet, or just started to take effect. But I was able to make an argument basically that a city councilman saw it unofficially, and that was a waiver under a case from the 70s called Black Panther Party versus Kehoe. The city was not going to release it, and when they did, it made international headlines. It's a horrifying killing. And from there, just started filing public records requests, lots of them. The reason for the name Open Vallejo was I was mindful of the retaliation that people had talked about, and so I wanted to kind of experiment and see if, just kind of do a little penetration testing, try and map the field. And pretty soon after that, we started uncovering things that really shocked the conscience, which I can talk about maybe in the impact section. And so, that's the origin story. Total fluke, total accident, but it's the most important thing and the most meaningful and rewarding thing I've ever done in my entire life.
And there's so much, I want to pull out, and I think throughout this conversation we'll pull out, because I do want to talk impact. I want to talk about the kind of care you take in producing this news and the kind of time that it takes to do this work as well, as something I do want to address, because you and I talk almost every week about this, and I know how much time it takes for you to complete one story. For you and Madeline, just a quick question about, how do you respond, or do you respond to questions or criticism about being a white founder of an organization, in a predominantly serving communities of color? Now I know, Vallejo is kind of this equally diverse community, but do you get any criticism from that? Madeline, I know you work specifically with the immigrant communities. And you've talked to me before, you're like, I'm not of that community. So how do you respond to any criticism that you hear or face as a founder?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. I first of all, I think that, you don't need to be a person of color to care about the lack of equity in journalism. I'm white and, have the privilege of my skin color, of speaking English, of a college degree. And yet, the community that I'm a part of, from, my friends, my family, my neighbors, my child's classmates, that community is very diverse. And I have never seen that diversity reflected in our media and in our civic conversations. And when I started El Timpano, I was very conscious of the fact that, I was not a part of the communities that we serve, which is why I started El Timpano with a lot of humility and also really with an openness to the sort of criticism that you're alluding to, or to questions, to community leaders saying, well, who are you to be talking about this, to be asking these questions? And open to the possibility that, maybe the idea that I have really, there's not a need for this. But every single community leader that I talked to, and then, as I broadened that conversation to really include hundreds of residents, every single person appreciated the conversation, and said, like, yes, there is an immense need for Spanish language local news that's responsive to our communities. And honestly, you know, I haven't had really much criticism at all from the communities that we serve. El Timpano has really earned the trust, because we really take that, you know, collaborative and listening first approach to what we're doing. You know, and our team, our organization has grown very much because of, you know, folks from the communities that we serve stepping up and wanting to be a part of this because they really understand the need for it. You know, I'm today the only white person who's a part of our team. My colleagues are primarily first or second generation immigrants, and as we expand our team and expand our leadership, you know, I'm committed to El Timpano being a Latino and immigrant-led organization. So, you know, I think that's, you know, a big part of it is really just a sense of humility and collaboration, and letting the community really drive the process, that has earned that trust for El Timpano.
No, I love that. And Jeff, earning the trust of the community. And I think, you know, you and I talk about this with the work you've done in Open Vallejo. And, you know, what are some of the ways, you know, be really brief though, on that you know, you're earning it. What are you doing to earn the trust of the community? Because you are earning it. But how are you intentionally going about building that trust?
Yes, and it's an excellent question. This is something I think about a lot, and I think that Madeline's answer is, you know, as thoughtful as they come. And we have a similar experience. We have an extraordinarily good relationship with the community. I think because one, I'm a part of it. I moved back home, and this is where I grew up. And so I'm here and I'm out and I'm about. You know, I'm at the farmer's market. I'm going to cookouts. I'm, you know, just around, and running into people, you know, showing up at the protests, covering them, covering city council meetings. But, you know, I think that it is something that I need to be mindful of now and going forward. And as when we have the resources to expand, as Madeline said, you know, I'm very committed to ensuring that this organization is representative of the community and communities that it serves. You know, our advisory board are pretty diverse, but our staff, you know, is wide at this point. There's only 2 of us doing editorial work at this time. But really, I just try to focus on honoring my neighbors and being a good neighbor through the work and through the relationships. Vallejo is a place that has long been neglected and derided. You know, it really, I think, exemplifies the vacuum that the idea that Black Lives Matter, Brown Lives Matter, that seeks to address. And so really all we're doing is just trying to live up to that through our service and our work. And for now, that's, you know, what we're doing. But I know that won't be enough, you know, initially in the long run. We want to pull, we want this to be more participatory and inclusive going forward as well.
Thank you, Jeff. What I like to do, I want to just stay with you for just a minute, and you and I talk about the kind of reporting that you do. You know, you're doing freedom of information requests. You are combing through data. You have a data journalist as a part of the team. You will hire, you know, a photojournalist to like recreate, you know, footage of things that you can't have access to help better tell the story. All of that takes so much time. And so we're in this, you know, 24-hour news cycle challenge and it takes time to produce this kind of quality, high impact journalism. How are you handling that? How are you thinking about that? What are you thinking about doing maybe in the future? I know I want it succinct, but I do want to hear what you're doing, because you and I talk about this, and it is, I think, something that is on the minds of all of us who are doing this kind of work.
That is a challenge for us because the type of investigations we do take many, many months. We are trying to produce work that is essentially creating a record, a historical record that has been, to date, nothing but gaslighting and lies. And so, we're meticulous. We're digging very deep. And just to give a quick example, the first story we published, when our kind of breakout story, showed that the Vallejo police had been bending 1 point on their star-shaped badges for each person they killed. That has now sparked multiple investigations. It's bubbling up in federal civil rights cases that are seeking federal oversight of the department. It's coming up in local criminal cases. And that took 9 months to really get right. But the way it's resonated has, I believe, been worth it. That said, I would love to have the resources to be able to publish more often. And so one thing that we're planning to do is essentially an investigative news blog. We get all these tips. I mean, everybody talks to us at this point. And it's stuff, we don't want stuff to lay fallow. And so we have all these sort of scoops that don't require a 1,000-word story, or in our case, a 3,500-word story. So we want to start publishing more regularly, just kind of short, quick hits. So that's something we're looking at. And then also dashboards and things like that, so people can at a glance see what's going on with the city budget and with votes and things of that nature. But it takes a long time to do these stories. We have one dropping very soon that I think is hopefully going to be worth it.
Well, I love the investigative news blog concept. I'm going to steal that from you. For some of our stories, we'll get information in, and it's going to take a while for the investigation. And it's like, how do you at least give some information to the community, especially if it's something that really impacts them? What I'd like to do from that is, I think, you talk a little bit about impact, and I want to go into a conversation about impact. You're showing investigations that have occurred because of the reporting. I'd love for Madeline, because Madeline and then Larry and I've talked about the impact specific stories that have been written, and the impacts that you've seen in the community. But Madeline, I remember it was the first time I saw an impact report from a news organization. Madeline, how are you defining and measuring impact in your work?
Yes, I've been thinking a lot about impact and how journalism makes an impact. And I think there is a very old school but very enduring notion of how journalism makes an impact, which is that, it shines a spotlight on abuse and brings that, uncovers this abuse, bringing it to, people of influence, people in power. And there's this pretty specific notion of what we're talking about when we say people of power. Those are elected officials and voters and, business leaders, usually white, usually quite affluent, usually men. I've actually been told by funders, after explaining to them El Timpano's model, that they don't quite see how El Timpano will make an impact until or unless we reach public radio audiences, which I think kind of gets to that sort of profile. And for the record, El Timpano does and will continue to partner with public radio, and I appreciate the impact of that theory of change. But I also see our work as challenging this notion that journalism must reach a certain profile of influential people to make an impact. I think our work is demonstrating particularly during a pandemic that is, most heavily impacting communities of color, poor communities of color. Our work is demonstrating that audiences of immigrants are also powerful, and that journalism that equips them to make informed decisions for their families and for their communities, and to take action can be extremely powerful. And we hear on a regular basis subscribers telling us how, information from El Timpano helped them separate fact from fiction, and, get a COVID-19 vaccine and navigate that really complex vaccination process. That is impact. And, I think during a time of, misinformation wars that have led to such devastating public health impacts, it is, you just cannot understate the value and impact of that sort of journalism.
There's a question in that we have from Stephanie Williams, actually my editor at Black Voice News, and she's asking about your text strategy, how you launched your first text strategy, or I guess initiative, which we may not have time to go into here, but one of the things she asked is how you're measuring impact in that approach. So I'm really curious about how you are looking at impact when it comes to approaches like SMS.
Yeah, so we evaluate on a regular basis. We keep metrics of our subscribers, our subscriber growth. That's how I can tell you that we're reaching 10% of Oakland Spanish-speaking households, as well as now immigrants from across the Bay Area. Something else that we also track and evaluate is engagement data, and I think this shows kind of how El Timpano's model of really creating a platform for two-way conversation is so valuable, that, in the past year, about 1 in every 2 subscribers has written in. So it's not just that we're sending a mass text of information, but the real value is that community members know that El Timpano is a source that they can go to and trust if they have a question or if they have a story to tell. And so that engagement data is another way that we measure our impact. And then we also produce journalism, in partnership with other news outlets. So we've, one thing that we may have noted in that impact report is, some of our reporting on the stories that community members have brought to our attention has reached the Governor Newsom's office, because we've been one of the only news outlets that's actually centering the voices of Indigenous Mayan immigrants who actually here in the Bay Area have had the highest rates of COVID-19. So those are some of the ways that we're evaluating our impact.
Good. And I'm looking at the rest of Stephanie's question, and it's making me think we have a workshop we need to do for Media in Color on SMS that you can lead for our cohort in the Sustainability Lab, because I think that would be a really good workshop that could benefit so many of us. So thank you for that. Larry, I want you to kind of jump in and talk a little bit about the impact of the work. Like currently, what is some of the impact you're seeing in the work that you're producing, the journalism you're producing at Sacramento Observer?
Sure. Let me just jump in for 2 things real quick. I'll come to that in a quick second. One, to Jeff and Madeline, keep up the good work. I would also encourage them to really work at trying to make sure that you do have people that reflect the community in your spaces. I know you both articulated that very clearly. I'm a big fan of the Observer has helped non-African American focused newsrooms, or you could call them majority-led newsrooms, with trying to help diversify their newsrooms for generations. Our communities are better when all newsrooms reflect the communities that they're serving. So keep up the good work related to that. And then the text messaging as well too. We were the first Black newspaper to start doing text alerts. We started doing them, I think, in 2009, I think. And so to Madeline's point, particularly for those communities that have not had easy access to broadband and technology and desktops and the like. Text alerts are really, and SMS is really a great way to really get to people where they are. And you get really great response to them as well too. So I would encourage that.
And before you answer the other question, what I'm hearing too is that you want to work with Madeline on that workshop that we need to do.
I don't know if I
for
volunteered
Media in
myself
Color.
for that. I don't know. I think my internet, my broadband internet connection just went out. I couldn't really hear
I
you.
heard, Larry. I think that's what I heard.
So as far as coming to, I think it was impact in some of the work that we're doing
Yes.
locally. It's there is the technology part of things that kind of illustrate how your work is getting received, whether it's through engagement data, other signs of data and analytics that have helped to illustrate that. We've had kind of two. I'll go two different directions. One is we've been working pretty closely. Our senior staff writer, Genoa Barrow, who's also our health equity reporter, she's done some really great work, very specifically about monitoring the County of Sacramento and particularly its use of federal COVID relief funds here into Sacramento. And the Observer we were able to break a story about how the county had basically taken the lion's share of its federal COVID relief funds and invested it into their law enforcement, sheriff's department, and corrections facilities. And it was a story, we broke it like on a Friday afternoon, and turned into an absolute firestorm over the weekend and into the beginning of the week. The mainstream, the Bee, wasn't able to pick it up until the following week, and others. And it was followed very aggressively by community leaders stepping up and encouraging the community to participate in the County Board of Supervisors meetings, which happened the Tuesday following, to really raise hell about the funding and how the funds were not distributed properly. It turned into literally hundreds of people showing up virtually at the County Board of Supervisors meeting, which, in Sacramento County, our county is one of the most elusive counties I could imagine. They'll do meetings at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday, when no one can attend, no one can pay attention. They'll do stuff in the cloak of secrecy. They have historically had an extremely non-diverse Board of Supervisors. There's been one African-American Board of Supervisor representative in the county's history. And so it's been an issue of real concern. Sacramento County Sacramento, while it is very diverse, it has some very rural areas that are not, that equity is not necessarily one of the first things that they lead with. And so from our reporting, we were able to, and the community's involvement, able really to reallocate those funds. There was about $45 million that ended up coming into the community for COVID health, COVID support and COVID relief funding. And so that was a real tangible example of kind of how that impact reporting works in our community. Another way that we really can show impact also has been through our ability to generate support for our for-profit newsroom through philanthropy. Local foundations such as Sierra Health Foundation have recognized obviously the work that we've been doing, and are helping to support the work of our newsroom with philanthropic support. So, as I mentioned, Genoa Barrow kind of going into our health equity as our health equity reporter. She, portion of her salary is being helped supported by Sierra Health Foundation and the work that supporting the work through that. So those are just a couple different ways. I mean, again, there's the other ways that Aunt Madeline said, but I just kind of wanted to bring those to light as well too.
The conversation about philanthropy, I think, is like a whole other, half day session where we talk about like the different ways in which philanthropy is becoming an important revenue stream for local journalism and local news. And I'm talking not just big, foundations, but local philanthropic support, local donors. It's just becoming important conversation we definitely need to have. The other thing you brought up that I think is important is like the idea of these government meetings. Our board of supervisors mirrors yours. The time of day, the makeup of the board. I'm sure that's mainly across, especially inland California. You probably see the same thing. But then there's water boards. There are joint power authority. I mean, all of these things that meet mornings during the week when people can't access, really can't access in their work. Such a huge problem. So it's good that you're there, at least, with some focus. We've been talking in our newsroom about like where we're going to focus our energy with limited resources. Is it the Board of Supervisors? Because that's one of those institutions that so much of our money flows through there for our locals, communities, and just no real eyes on what's happening there.
Yeah, and I don't want to forget to mention too, even from that reporting, and I did kind of forget, was that that reporting and that issue sparked actually a grand jury investigation into the county and its misdealings as well too. And so that is an evolving story. And for us as a newsroom, the county, like you said, we don't really have the resources to do a whole lot of this reporting with regularity, but our attention is they've got our attention for sure.
Yeah, and I think what I wanted this conversation to show is what is being done with the limited resources that we have, right? The impacts that we are seeing with the limited resources we have, because we are so closely embedded in our communities and tied to our communities. Larry, would love for you to talk just about, and I know we're coming to a close. I didn't get to all the questions I have, but this is one that I wanted, I think all of you can speak on. And in the future of local news is collaborative. And I mean, we're hearing it, right? We're hearing every conversation, every response that we've had. You talk about the different collaborations and partnerships that you have to produce this news. Of those that you're involved in, and Larry, I don't know if you want to speak to what's happening with Solving Sacramento, but what do you think are good models for local journalism and reporting in the future when you look at collaborations and partnerships that you're currently involved in?
Sure. So I think we are involved really in two main ones for us. One is partnership with Capital Public Radio. We share a Report for America education reporter, or I say we will be sharing. We shared one at the beginning of last year. Unfortunately, that reporter didn't work out, so we're getting a new one in June. And that really started from a relationship that our two newsrooms kind of created after the police killing of Stephon Clark here in Sacramento. And so it was a need for, it was kind of the peanut butter and chocolate, right? They wanted to do more work in our community as a newsroom. And we wanted some assistance with trying to just build on the work that we were doing in the community. And it started from a community listening session where they had invited us, and the community's arms were kind of crossed about, Cap Radio coming in. And I'm not going to say they were parachuting in, but the idea that was received like they were parachuting in to kind of cover what was going on in the community. And I spoke up at that meeting about the impact that, this partnership could have. So that's kind of where it started. And then it evolved into our two newsrooms working together to apply for that position. And that has worked really well. I mean, I think we have the structure for it. Just want to make sure that we get the right reporter in, and we think we might have the right one joining us here in June to do reporting on African American K through 12 education issues. The other, you mentioned Solving Sacramento, and I'll try to be as quick as I can with this, but that started about 4 or 5 years ago. Really from me going around as a second generation publisher, trying to figure out, what was gonna work for us. And I really felt like collaboration was something that we needed to do more of here in Sacramento. So I started meeting with newsroom leads and publishers throughout Sacramento, just asking them very loosely, what does collaboration look like for you? What are some of your pain points in your newsroom? Are there areas that we could work together? And it went from everything from one weekly publication saying that maybe we would alternate distributing each other's publication just to ease the burden of doing the work of distributing a print product each week, to maybe going after grant funding or whatever it might be. Fast forward to COVID. COVID hit. One of our newsrooms here in Sacramento, the alternative publication, Sacramento News and Review, struggled mightily from the closure of clubs and bars and the like. And so they went from printing and distributing one of the largest distributed publications, print publications in the region, to not publishing at all. The publisher and I sat down together. We had a competitive, healthy relationship before. But this was the first time where we were able to kind of sit down together for several hours, and we talked about, kind of the issues. And from there, I said, look, I've been talking to these other folks. Let's see if there's something we can do together. And we started meeting with the great support from the News Review. They had Joellen Kaiser as a consultant, and she helped kind of herd our cats of kind of coming together. And we started meeting once a week, and we met for about a year about what do we need to do as a region to help our newsrooms be sustainable, as well as what impact and work can we do in the community that was of value. And so about 8 newsrooms, as well as Sac State, as well as California Groundbreakers, which does engagement work in the community. We've all come together and launched Solving Sacramento. We were able to get funding from Solutions Journalism Network. Looks like there'll be some other funding that comes down the pike to help us with some of the work. And the first year we agreed is going to be focused on issues of affordable housing and rebooting of the arts. And then we'll see what year 2 looks like as well too. But collaboration is not easy at all. But I've the old African proverb: if you want to go quick, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so I think that's the mindset for us as this collaboration has launched and is starting to. I think our first series of stories are going to kind of launch sometime in the next couple of weeks. So.
Great, thank you. I know we're closing in on time. I know we started a little late, so we have a few more minutes. Jeff and Madeline. Jeff, I know you do work, kind of partnership work. Your quick thoughts on that, and then we'll end with Madeline's. I know most of a lot of your reporting, Madeline, is in partnership with other news organizations. So Jeff, just quickly, your kind of ideal model. Collaboration.
Yes, so we actually, Open Vallejo is more than a newsroom. It's intended to be a laboratory. We believe that a lot of what we're doing is entirely reproducible by other folks in their own communities. There is no secret sauce. You just gotta, the stuff that has been working that's like technical or, legal knowledge, Brown Act, California Public Records Act, is entirely transferable. What is not transferable is trust and legitimacy and ethics. And, there's a saying from photography, F8 and be there. That's how you get the shot, just, F8 and be there. And so we strongly believe that this is entirely reproducible. And we want to work with not only other organizations around Vallejo and on behalf of Vallejo, but also to help lower barriers to entry and serve other communities, not by us going into communities and saying, well, here's what we figured out, or here's how to fix things, but more a public health model, building trainings, toolkits, support, as well as doing high impact journalism, where things are particularly stuck. But we have a partnership with ProPublica that is about to bear fruit, very, very close to publication on some enormous stories that will be far bigger than anything we've done thus far. We are part of a pilot for this Protecting Journalists Pro Bono program, where we're getting very high quality pro bono support, and we're hoping to help support, hopefully, that being available to other newsrooms. We're part of the California Reporting Project. I want to work with you.
Yes, we have plans.
We got plans. Madeline, Larry, same deal. Really want to work with you. And one thing that I'll just say briefly is, and we've also, we had an internship program at UC Berkeley, graduate school journalism interns, hoping to do some stuff with Stanford. But also our sources. They are, and I can't get into detail here, but there's just a level of rapport where it's just this really unique relationship where we're talking to really everybody. And it's sort of bizarre sometimes. It's sort of just, you kind of can't believe that folks are talking to you. And that, I think, is important because it means that we're, I think, doing it right, that we're being fair, that people trust us, and that even in some of the most delicate and painful moments, some of the scariest moments, people believe in us, and we do not take that lightly. We are, it's everything to us.
That trust, shines through, and you and I talk about this all the time. I love that idea of creating trainings and toolkits that other newsrooms can share, and then we can talk more about platforms to share it amongst the hundreds of small newsrooms that are here in California serving communities of color. Madeline, I want to let you end with a kind of final comment about this idea of partnerships and collaboration.
Yeah, thank you. I'm definitely taking lots of notes, especially Larry, from what you're sharing about your media collaborations. Like all of you, we're a tiny newsroom, and at this point. And so, really to make the most of our resources, we collaborate with other newsrooms to really combine our resources to produce impactful journalism. But the only thing I would add is that, we also see El Timpano as a community service, really like a community-based organization in the service of producing information and facilitating civic engagement. And so in that manner, we've also been involved in a lot of partnerships with other CBOs, with other nonprofit service organizations. And again, that's really in response to what we heard from community members, is that, what they want to see in media is news that helps connect them with the services and resources that they need. So we've partnered with local community clinics, local legal aid organizations. We just hired a civic partnerships manager really to manage those partnerships so that El Timpano can help really build or strengthen an infrastructure of connection between the communities that we serve and all of the other assets and resources and agencies within our communities. And that's something that I really look forward to expanding.
Oh, this is so great. I know we are so past time, so we can't answer any more questions. Of course, I have a list of now more conversations that I think we should have. I was taking notes as we talked, and I get to talk to the three of you separately. It was great to have you all in the same space and to connect you as well. I think you're all doing such wonderful work, important work, and impactful work for your communities, but also for all communities, right, as models for all communities here in in California and beyond. So I want to thank you for giving us your time today. Thank the audience for listening, and just let everyone know that this recording will be available on the JSK YouTube site in shortly, and so you can watch it and share it. And I will be sharing it, I will say, with some funders that I think should be looking at all of your work. So that's something I will promise to do myself. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.